Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. I hope you can all see my screen okay. All right. We'll jump straight into it so that we don't waste any time. But thanks for joining. My name's Courtney. I'm the peer learning manager at Soils for Life, and I'm the project manager of our cropping resilience project. Before I introduce Nicole, who doesn't really need an introduction, but I'd like to just share a little bit about why we're running this webinar. Soils for Life is a not-for-profit focused on supporting Australian farmers to improve their soil health. And we do this by sharing farmer stories, running farmer discussion groups, developing a bunch of resources, and running events like this, and much more. This webinar is part of our cropping resilience project, which is all about supporting Australian grain growers to improve their soil health and drought resilience. And one of the activities we've been working on is with Vidacycle, who produced the Soilmentor app. And so Soilmentor is an app that supports farmers to monitor their soil health and collect data and then make informed decisions based, off the back of that. So we'll get to see that in action in just a moment. We've got some funding to support 4 more Australian grain growers to trial this app for free for 2 years. So if this is of interest to you, then please reach out. The farmers that Nicole is going to be coaching are 3 Australian grain growers who received access to this app through our project. So we're looking forward to see how it's going for them. And also through the cropping project, we've also got some cropping discussion groups. So if you're interested in learning from other Australian grain growers and how to improve your soil health and implement regenerative practices, then please reach out and we can fill you in. I think Ellie has shared some links in the chat for you. And just housekeeping, please stay on mute. We've got a lot to get through. For the next 60 minutes, Nicole's going to be looking at the farms of these 3 farmers. So there will be 20 minutes question time at the end. Please drop any questions as they arise in the chat though, and we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. Cool. So Nicole, we're really grateful to have Nicole on today. She's a globally recognized agroecologist, speaker and author. She's got a wealth of practical farming and food production experience. And she's got 18 years of experience as a regenerative agriculture coach and educator. She's a big inspiration to many of us at Soils for Life, so we're stoked to be running this webinar. So thank you, Soilmentor, for making, thank you, Vidacycle, I should say, for making this happen. And thanks, Nicole, for jumping on this morning. Or what time is it over in Montana? I'll hand over to you.
It is 5 o'clock in the evening, sweltering humid heat, thunderstorms actually causing a lot of fires right around us, and yeah, interesting time. So it's hot and it's late. But thank you for having me. Lots of familiar faces. It's always great to do things with Soils for Life. I'm very excited. Vidacycle and I work together to create the Regen platform and to kind of provide some more descriptions in terms of guiding what is it that we're seeing and what potentially could that mean in soils. So should I hand over to you, Courtney? Yeah, I don't need to do a big spiel.
No, that's okay. I think Victoria has she can take on the screen.
Great. So we'll start with Jessica. I'm going to start sharing your Soilmentor account now. And hope you can all see that. Great. Just going to zoom in. Over to you, Nicole. Great. Can you all see this?
Hi, Jessica.
Hi. Starting with a great photo there of some of the journey that we've been on. That was sort of about halfway through of the mammoth blue gum clearing program that has taken 3 times longer than we expected. So that was some of the burn lines that we had in the long road to trying to clean this place up.
What year was this?
That was 2023, I think. So we bought the property in 2021, sight unseen. It was COVID, so we actually live in Melbourne, and this place is in southwest WA. So we couldn't actually set foot in it for the first 6 months, and it was a total blank canvas. Nothing was on it apart from blue gum plantations, hardwood plantations, some arable, only about 30 hectares, I think. So it's been a long road. No fences, no water, no power, no house, no roads, not a thing.
Wow. Well, once we take a look at your soils, it's actually quite incredible to watch what you've done in a very short amount of time. Do you want to tell us a little bit when you get started? What was the program in this, where we're going to look at your soil mentor?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've sort of used the same sample sites where we had our agronomist originally take soil samples. So I'm just trying to keep them consistent. We've had about, I think there's 8 or 9 sample sites across the property. So I'm trying to use those GPS dots and use these for consistency. So you'll see me reference soil site A, E, H, etc. So that's sort of just referencing different spots on the property. And the good thing is they also look at different soil types. We've got quite a few different sort of soil types across the farm.
Fabulous. So what we're looking at here is the Regen dashboard, and what I love about this is it's fairly simple. These are our the Regen platform. So we chose 10 different measurements. Vidacycle were very mean, and they were like, if you could only choose 10. So being able to look at ground cover. So did you do the actual basal density, the bare earth? Did you do that?
I did, yes,
measurement?
I did on most of them. So before I had the Soilmentor, I had some historical data that I have added to it since I've come onto this app. So some of it wasn't targeted to, I didn't know what the parameters were. So I added what I had historically, and then I've tried to stick to that in the recent results that I've taken.
All right. So when we do bare, we're going to do that either on a transect. We've got some new ways to measure that for people that don't have the time to do the 100 measurements that it takes along that. But you're saying that there was 0 bare earth. So have you got litter on that surface?
Yeah,
So
plenty of litter. Plenty of litter, plenty of, I won't call them weeds, but multiple different species, shall we say. So yeah, not so much bare earth at the time that I was taking these results.
Okay, great. And then the bricks barometer, that's a setting where we compare the bricks of our desired plant against the bricks of a least desired plant. So on East Paddock, who are you comparing? Who did you measure?
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit to just reconcile these numbers. I've just got the Regen dashboard open as well. Is there a way I can dig into this to just see, because I did take some specific examples against a weed and our crop in July somewhere, but I just can't find them.
Okay, I think we might actually have them in this section. Yeah, Victoria is all over it. So if you've got a bricks here of 12 in your grass crop, then did you get a bricks of 3 in your weeds? That would have given you a 9.
Yeah, so there was a much lower brick somewhere on the weed, which I was pleased to see.
So it's such an important piece of information, because what it tells you is that you're heading in the right direction for the plant that you're wanting to grow. And what I find is on many properties, this can be flipped, and people will have higher bricks in their least desirable indicator plants than they will in their crop. So this is fantastic, because it means that your plant, in this case, is winning the game of life, capturing sunlight energy. That's fantastic. Really good. All right, Victoria, have you got a soil picture?
Great.
We
wanted to look at this one.
Yeah, that one to the right. Yes, beautiful. You know what I love about this? Did you dig this hole there on purpose, Jessica?
Dig it on purpose?
Yes.
Well, I
In
did,
this
yes.
spot.
In this, well, this is one of my soil samples, so it had just happened to be on one of those GPS points.
Oh, yeah. Because what you've dug into is potentially a fairy ring or the middle of like a mushroom colony. Did you see that? Did you see the mushrooms on
Really?
the ground?
No.
Yeah. So right there is those are saprophytic fungi. So we have, everyone's probably more familiar with mycorrhizal fungi that live in and on plant roots. We also have our saprophytes that are breaking organic material down, and you've dug right in the middle of a circle. So you can see the fungi to the right. And then you can see the white mycelia are actually attached to some of that soil next to the roots. So it's a really, really cool thing to see. Brilliant. What I also like in this image is you can see some of the rhizosheaths. So see on that right-hand side, and you scored rhizosheaths that you found this in most places that you were digging?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So some of our plant species often don't form these rhizosheaths. So that might be like asparagus. Many of our brassicas don't form these relationships. But what's so great about this is particularly in your first year of transition is that you've got these glues and mucilage and all sorts of materials starting to form what was going to really create aggregation. So the bigger that rhizosheath, it's a good indicator. We have some plants that are better at really forming a lot of glues. So corn, sorghum, Sudan, chia are really good at forming these glues, whereas some plant species will actually disperse soil. So we want to see plants that are really helping to build soil in that first step. So that's really good.
Fantastic.
You can ask me questions as you go too, Jess, if you're like, blah, 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 if you see something.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Or if there's a picture. Yep. Okay. Vic, I think you had another.
Yeah.
You have so many great photos. I love the information that you did collect, and you said it wasn't long enough, but you've done a really thorough job.
Oh, hopefully it helps.
Yes.
And I tried to provide a little bit of some background photos as well, so you can see some context of where we've come from.
This is beautiful. So did you do a seed treatment with these? Are they peas?
Yeah, these are peas. This is actually a funny one. So this is going back to last year, and we hadn't even completed the blue gum clearing. There were still stumps in the ground. We could barely get a seeder across. It was very, very poor results. We thought we'll just do what we can for now. So we put this multi-species sort of green manure mix in, not expecting much to happen, and not much did happen. But I found a few areas, and I dug up some peas, and I was thrilled with that.
Yeah, that's
In terms of
absolutely fantastic. If we can, yeah, in terms of rhizosheaths, I mean, maybe not
maybe
a
not
crop,
really.
but I do think, yeah, but I think, you know, getting anything in the ground when you first start is brilliant, and then actually being able to look at, well, who's thriving, who's doing really well. I mean, legumes are obviously indicating, you know, if they're the ones that are really thriving, then perhaps your nitrogen cycle's not working very well. But this is lovely to see. We don't see very big nodules on these, but I think you've got nodules on the other.
There wasn't.
On other photos, right?
Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah.
And in this year, in the prior year, 2023, when this photo was taken, I had no nodules. I couldn't find any on the farm, either in the clover. There was a lot of naturally occurring clover or the peas. But I'm very happy to see in this year's samples that I took recently, the clovers are starting to nodulate, those pink nodules. So that's the first time I've seen it.
Fantastic. You know, and it's something we can sometimes look at as like a little bit of trace element when we, in our biopriming, you know, putting compost on those seeds, which I think some of you are doing. Are you doing that, Jess? Did you put
That's
something?
what we did this year. So in the 2023, we couldn't even get over the ground with a sprayer. So we weren't able to do anything to the ground, even the seed, we didn't have the setup. This year, however, we had a beautiful seed coating. So a whole mix of seaweed and fish hydrolysate. We had some vermicast extract in there, a number of other things, which was really good. Finally, being able to get that out on the seed, and we've done our first spray this year, so that we can actually start taking things forward, which is fantastic.
Gosh, yeah, no, it really is. I mean, getting started can be the biggest hurdle. Hey, Victoria, have we got a picture of legumes from this year?
Let's have a look.
I
So
think there is.
search here.
I don't know if it's something you planted.
There you go.
Yes.
Oh, look at that. That
Cla-
makes it easy.
And I
So
tried
are
to
these
zoom
all
in
from
on
this year?
crushing. Yes, they
Mhm.
are. So I crushed that little
Yep.
nodule on my nail there, so you could see it. The clover is only it's only quite young. It's only come up in the last couple of weeks. We
Yep.
had a very late break to the season, so it's still quite small, but I think it's starting.
Oh, it's fantastic. And you can, even without pinching them, you see further along, there's actually nodules there that you can see a pink from the outside. But, you know, sometimes if you have white nodules, do pinch them and take a look. It's telling you about that nitrogen fixation process. So one, you have the organisms that they're forming a relationship with. And two, they're actually able to fix, which means that they're getting adequate cobalt and molybdenum, which is really critical when you're early on in this phase. Um, and these nodules will form really, really rapidly. So it's not unusual to see tiny plants and you'll dig them up and there'll be tiny little baby nodules. So that's fantastic.
Fantastic. Can I ask you about that nitrogen fixing process? I've read conflicting views in terms of the nitrogen that these nodules and these plants can create during the growing cycle is available during that season, and others that say it's not available until that plant dies and breaks down into the soil. I'd be keen to get your thoughts on that.
Well, there's a couple of different processes going on. So you think of the root shedding process that will release some nitrogen. They're not like leaking a bunch of nitrogen, which sometimes people think might be going on. But most of that nitrogen is being returned in forms of either animals eating it, so in manure or on decay of material. But also mycorrhizae and other organisms are sharing nitrogen between these legumes. So there is an aspect of sharing nutrients, which is really cool. So yes, some of it is available in this season. Some will be available. Like when we see these big flushes from, let's say, broom or gorse, and we see nitrates in the waterways, that's generally happening because of all the litter as opposed to bunches of root exudates. So it's not the same as nitrogen in a fertilizer bag. I think sometimes is a concern because what that plant is pushing out into the soil also has carbon with it. So there are exudates, carbon and nitrogen exudates, but yeah, so there's a bit of both happening.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'm always happy to see, you know, a proportion of my pasture have legumes in it, and it's just something to consider if you're doing 100% legumes, whatever that might be. I just got this pop-up asking if I'd swap languages to Indonesian. Yeah, but yeah, so if we were growing, let's say just soybean, for instance, or lucerne, just to consider that the amount of nitrogen that you can be releasing into that soil profile can be detrimental. But yeah, it's great. Excellent. So Victoria, do we want to spend like, is it 10 minutes per person so we've got time to have a discussion? So,
It's about 15-20 per person. So Jessica, if you have any other questions for Nicole.
Yeah, interesting. And I think we were asked to select 3 of the regen indicators for this particular purpose. I did a few more just because I was there and I could. In terms of water infiltration, would be keen to understand if our results are within good parameters.
Yeah. So if you take a look, you'll see you're all in the green. You're below that 12-minute. We just kind of talk about 12.5 minutes as being like that threshold of soil systems really in decline. It's still fairly slow, but absolutely fantastic considering it's your first year in conversion out of what would have been pretty tough growing environment. The fact you couldn't even get equipment into the ground. So yeah, you're on a good base of recovery. You've also got, looking at your soil test because we couldn't help ourselves, you actually have really good baseline organic material.
We do.
Organic matter
yes.
that's going to be helpful. Yeah. So I would look at how do we keep that functional, because just because you've got good high organic matter on your soil test doesn't mean that that's converting to what we think of as functional carbon, what's going to be really food for microbes and helping with infiltration and growing crops. So this is your time to really look at how do I convert that to more stable organic forms. And that really does come through bricks and stimulating microbiology and getting that converted. So for year one, I'd be pretty happy with those infiltrations, but know that this is the joy of having a benchmark, is that you can really see, am I moving this system? Am I moving the dial in the right direction? Or let's say next year you come back under similar moisture. This one's very moisture dependent. Are you under similar moisture conditions? And if you see it, taking longer and longer to infiltrate, then you can go, okay, what's happening? Am I seeing a collapse of that soil structure or soil crusting starting to form, or even thatching? Not that we see a lot of thatching and cropping, but yeah, are you seeing something that's really declining that soil structure? So yeah, did you notice that when you were digging holes, like there should be a spading ease if infiltration's working?
Yeah, the spading ease was fairly good. It's already improved on this property in the last couple of years. We've still got a way to go, and it depends on which location and what the soil was and what was growing there. But definitely something I can keep an eye on and keep monitoring.
Yeah. Excellent.
In terms of our crop, what we've done, we're trying to integrate some intercropping strategies. So we're actually using companion species. So our primary crop is oats, and we're certified organic, by the way. I'm not sure if I mentioned that.
Yeah.
So a few challenges there, but that's okay. We'll get there. So our primary crop is oats. We've also put in tillage radish and Balanza clover. So that's the clover that you can see. And I think I dug up a tillage radish there as well, to just a little baby one, to show some rooting depth, because some of the oat rooting depths were pretty abysmal. It's not looking great, to be honest. The crop is not, it's not outstanding. It's better in some areas than others, but it's very, very patchy. I wondered if you'd had experience on prior blue gum soils. We hear a lot about they can leave the soils very non-wetting, and it does take some time to actually move past that. I was interested in what could be our constraints at the moment. Some indicators are going in the right direction. I'm happy with quite a few, but I wasn't expecting a stellar year the first year, but I was hoping it would be a little bit better than it was, but perhaps it just needs more time.
Well, this is the unfortunate thing. Well, not unfortunate. It just is what it is when we're coming out of blue gums, and know that there are those suppressive tendencies, and I think that's where oats can be so helpful. And also just to think of some of our remediation plants, which you could add like sunflowers into that mix. Like there's plants that are known to break down some of those waxes. And it's also the benefit of vermicast. So vermicast has 5 different organisms in them that are specific to breaking down some of these waxy coatings that can really inhibit your water infiltration. So that's why for me, I'm always wanting to add like some kind of worm juice when we're in that transition, because of that superpower that they've got. It also means like, what are you doing and thinking in terms of nitrogen when we're looking at building aggregation and building microbiology, because that aggregation is such a driver for your nitrogen cycle, and that stuff can take a little while. So yeah, sometimes I think we're often in a big rush, and obviously when we're looking at commercial interests and how to make a business viable, but it's like you can see there's indicators here that your soil is moving. But yeah, at the same time, we want to be able to have a crop, right? So looking at some of these fast growing species to just get that soil system humming, which it sounds like you're doing, right?
Trying to, yes.
Do we have we got a photograph like looking across the whole field, Vic? I think
Maybe a few.
some of that's older, right?
There's one there from July for soil site E.
Soil site E.
On page 2.
Maybe on page 2. Great. Thanks, Jessica. Oh, right here.
So what you'll see, this is an area that was previously arable, so this didn't have trees on it. Funnily enough, this is where we find all of our earthworms and our better aggregation down here. This, you'll see in the photo, there are oats growing in there, but most of it is, well, most of what you can see is there's a lot of onion grass. So the oats are sort of in between there. And this area wasn't such a bad area. The oats were going okay through here. They're just difficult to see. Obviously organic, we are not spraying this out prior to seeding. So we try and go in early, dry seeding, and get our primary crop up as quickly as we can, and sort of it will outcompete the onion grass. It's brixing very low, and it won't do much more than it's doing now. So hopefully the oats will come out on top of it.
Yeah. Often what we see with onion grass is just that poor functional calcium. So it's something else we can look at and either biopriming seed or thinking about with your foliars. Yeah, because right now those oats, yeah, they do look like they're struggling. Right?
Unfortunately, we also had some quite old seed. So due to some things that just didn't quite go our way in terms of timing, we were hoping to plant these oats last year. So we did have seed that has been sitting there for more than 12 months. I know that's affected the germination as well. So a couple of things against us there that didn't quite work, but things to build on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think ground cover is fantastic, and having a living plant, at least in this transitional period, if you can ride it out. Like for me right now, I've got a new piece of ground and I am just so excited to see weeds, because I'm like, there's something growing. There was a lot of bare ground when I arrived. So, sometimes it's like, okay, just how do I get plugged in and start this whole process? So, your first season, when it really counts, you're going to hit the ground running. Yeah,
absolutely.
Great job.
I feel the same. We after we cleared it, we had bare ground for a long time, and I said I never want to see it again. So even this is a vast improvement.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Jessica. Thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen 1 second and share Peter's account. Okay. Okay. Peter, would you like to start quick introduction while I bring up your account?
Sure. So we have a farm in northwest New South Wales, out near Narrabri, and so we've got 2 sites there. One is a former cropping paddock that we're looking to put in subtropical perennial grasses. So that's the one we're looking at now. I don't know whether there's a photograph from 3 or 4 months ago when it was just a bit of stubble on the ground. So we've obviously gone into a pretty wet season. So yeah, those ones on the bottom left. So yeah, I was looking at planting subtropicals in here, and we just got to the end of summer, and I was a bit nervous it was getting too cold, and looking at putting in tropicals, subtropicals coming into this summer. And yeah, I was pretty keen to cut back on our chemical use too, so I didn't really treat the weeds. So as you can see from the other photo, we've got a lot of milk thistle, there's some wild oats, and quite a few things that normally as a cropper I wouldn't really like to see growing if I was going to try and establish something. So, but it's been really wet. The profile is chock-a-block, so I'm not as nervous as I would normally be, but we've still got to work out how to plant grass in the next couple of months into what we're looking at now. But yeah, and as you dig deeper into the soil, you sort of understand that the roots that are there are hopefully adding some benefit. So yeah, and the other side we've got is something that's been planted to, it's a Bambatsi pasture that's been planted for about 16 years. It's been in the ground. So the soil type's similar. The one we're looking at now is sort of a slightly lighter soil, but they're both fairly heavy, cracking clays. and you'll see that with the holes that we've dug. But the other, just to compare this to the other site, I mean, they both need some more work and some understanding of what's going on. And I guess that's one of the reasons that I was keen to try out the Soilmentor to see just how we could measure what's going on and try to understand if we make changes, what we're going to see happen. So what would you like to look at first? I mean, in terms of the infiltration, yeah, look, this was
Yes.
the test the other day was a week after an inch of rain. So the infiltration was, yeah, it was pretty bad. It didn't really take a lot of moisture, a lot of water in at all, which is pretty understandable because the profile's chockers, it's clay, and it was really slow. I think it took, sorry, I haven't got it right in front of me, but yeah, just the first inch was taking, I think, 10 minutes maybe.
19 minutes.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I think what worries me is that there's really no earthworms at all in this country. It's probably been cropped for, I don't know, we've had it for about 20 years, so probably another 50 years before that. It does go under floodwater occasionally, so yeah, that adds to the issue. But yeah, I'd really like to get it into a permanent pasture. Just one, because of flood, and two, because I think the cropping's not really helping it, and just really want to understand how to increase the rooting depth. I think when you look at what's happening with the roots, we don't seem to be getting a lot of active roots below about 150 mils, and I guess that was one of the questions I had for you, Nicole, is once you start looking at those photographs, you know, there's certainly roots going deeper, but they don't look like they're very functional. Beside really maybe accessing moisture, they don't look like they're doing much else.
Oh, outstanding. Yeah, it's been really great looking at the photos that you provided, Peter. Victoria, do you want to take a look? Let's talk infiltration first. Oh, well, we had an image, right? You had an image in mind. Okay.
Do you want infiltration? Yeah, we can bring in
Actually, that one's fine. Yeah. Click on that one, third row down that you had the mouse over, and let's take a look at that, because I think this is pointing to of what's going on, right? So we have roots, root mass. It looks like there's quite a bit of undigested material on that top layer. We can think of that. It's not quite thatch. So thatch is really when those systems stop breaking down altogether. But just even by the color, like, does it smell? Like, does it have a? How would you describe the smell?
It smells quite earthy. It's not a real mushroomy sort of smell, but it's not a bad smell either.
Good. Yeah. So I often think of clay soils, you know, they're a blessing and a curse. You know, there's a lot of untapped potential in these soils, which, you know, and a lot of minerals and a big bank account and a big engine. It's just right now, think of the soil system like a digestive system. And I mean, basically what we're seeing are the signals for constipation, if I can just say that, right? So the energy systems turning over very slowly. There's not really a lot of fine root hairs. And I think if you just go sideways, Vic, I think there's more images kind of, of that.
Yeah, so these photographs are from the perennial pasture. Sorry, Nicole, you've probably worked that out, but just for everyone else. So this is not where the cropping stuff is. This is the stuff that's been in subtropicals for quite a while.
Yeah. So, you know, we talk about where 90% of that root mass is, and is an indicator of how resilient a system. And, you know, in perennial pastures, subtropical pastures, we should see quite a dense root mass for, you know, 30, 40 centimeters on some of these places, and then kind of getting more and more spindly as we get deeper. But what we see in these is it's kind of just spindly. So part of what's going on, I don't know if, did you get any images of rhizosheaths? Did you see that in your?
Not really. I think some of the other images, I mean, you can see the roots look fairly brown, and the ground's really wet, and with the clay, it's really hard to tease it apart to understand that. But
Yeah.
if you maybe scroll sideways, there might be a couple more that show it. But as it's so wet, as you break it up, it really just either sticks on the roots or it falls straight off. It doesn't sort of have that halfway in between. Yeah.
No, and this is where if you've got a bucket, you can actually just kind of gently agitate and wash them a little bit and get some of that soil off. But what we're seeing here is the release of a gas, and it's a natural gas called ethylene. So ethylene will actually build up when soils get waterlogged. They will build up when we have surface crusting or surface compaction. So you might see this in cropping situations in the plow pan, is that it's not that roots can't get through those zones or that they're too hard, because you might have seen roots actually like lift roads, right? Roots have incredible pressure in terms of being able to push through things, but what they can't push through is ethylene. So ethylene will actually stop the formation of root hairs. So there's some things that we can do. And what those of you that don't find rhizosheaths on your root systems, what we find is that generally relates to the amount of ethylene. So it'll stop root hair formation. And then that means you're not going to get adequate nutrition to those plants. So we can see issues with phosphorus and nitrogen because you haven't got good root hairs. We don't have that rhizophagy cycle working, which is where plants are basically eating microbes, which is quite cool. I like saying that to my vegan friends, that your plants aren't vegan. Anyway, so there's some stuff we can actually, if you were seeding, you could use a little bit of salicylic acid or willow extracts or even aspirin. So you can, so Tanya, we'll take a look at some rhizosheaths because we have got some more coming up. So that salicylic acid, we're only talking about like 2 or 3 aspirin in a mixing tank. Like, so just small amounts, but I love willow extract. I know willows get a bad rap in Australia, but if you've probably got willows around, if you chip them and soak them, you can actually extract salicylic acid off that. Now, salicylic acid's also really important for just plant health and plant defense, but it's one of the sort of low-hanging fruit when we are looking at transitioning. You want to get those roots down. We need root hairs because that's what's going to drive aggregation. And so it's this chicken and egg situation that you're in, is now we've got tight waterlogged soils, ethylene production, we don't get root hair formation, and therefore all these other cascading positive effects can't happen. So that might be something to take a look at rather than using machinery to open up soils, which some people will choose to do. And if you were going to do that, then again, putting biology down and trying to keep those spaces opened up. And then I think, was it infiltration and rhizosheaths in this case are interrelated, which is, I think, is quite interesting. And no earthworms, right? So think, Vic, can you show us that picture of the root going right down through the soil profile? I'm sure that was Peter's. Yes. Yeah.
One of these.
And one of them.
No, it was the one that was like the face was quite sheer and you could see little root hairs, like it was chasing, the root was chasing down a hole.
I remember which
we
one.
put it on our list.
I try the other page, maybe.
Yeah.
Is it this one, maybe?
Yep. And then
okay, here we go.
Those of you that are having technical issues with Vita for logging in, perhaps email someone on the Soils for Life team directly about that. Oh, it's there with that. Oh, see that sheared off face? I just saw it. Go down.
I think just next to the other photograph you had up, just down at the bottom there.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, that one.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah, so that's probably
So
about
good.
40
So
centimeters down.
beautiful. What do you think's caused that?
Well, I think the ground was really dry a few months ago, and so what's happened is, as we've had moisture build up, obviously the profile's filled. So what it was, the surface of the soil was pretty soft and not as cracked. But then once you dug down below about sort of 150, 200 mil, there were big cracks in the ground. And I mean, we were talking about melon holes earlier. So what happened when we started to get the rain is that we actually, I wouldn't consider this melon hole country, but we probably had something similar going on where the cracks at depth were going down about 1 metre. And so a lot of that surface soil washed into the cracks. And I guess what's happened here is that as the milk thistle's grown in this is the fallow ground that we were looking at first. So as the thistles have grown, I think they've just followed the roots down, the cracks down into the ground, because the soil almost seems too dense to be able to for the roots to infiltrate. And that's what it seems when you're digging into it. The ground's really, it's wet, but it's just really compacted. It seems like there's very little organic matter in it. And I think that's what I really need to work out how to change, because there's obviously, we've got the big clay bucket full of moisture, but the roots aren't really accessing enough of it.
Victoria, can you zoom in on this picture? Because I think there's some really interesting stuff that you can see. So notice there's these changes in colors. So there's mottling, and we could think of mottling as being something that can happen when soils get really wet, but it can also be from mixing. So this could be older mixing, historic mixing. But again, it speaks to the role and the importance of earthworms, because and I suspect this is a crack rather than earthworm activity.
Yep.
But if this is the role of the earthworms, is to be able to open these soils up and allow, plants to mix in air and gas exchange and all of that. So we could think of what would take the role of milk thistle, which could be something like chicory, like lucerne, or well, I don't know if lucerne will do well in this kind of soil, but thinking some of these species that can really just kind of crack on and open that up and do the milk thistle out of a job. I know in Tasmania they have the black-haired worm, Apodectodia longa, the black-haired worm. And I know farmers that will actually take sods of soil and bring them to their place and spread this worm, because this guy is a serious earth mover and will build tunnels that go down like many, many meters, allowing those roots to actually chase it. So I think not having earthworms in these situations is critical. Now you've got the moisture, so it's asking the question of what's been happening historically that's meant that we don't have worms, and then how do we get them back? Because even in conventional systems, it's now getting harder and harder to farm soils like these, because we don't have aggregation, we don't have water infiltration, and you get flooding and waterlogging. Whereas these soils would have breathed in the past. It's how do we get that back, right? So one is ask the question of why do I have earthworms, and then two, how do we get them back? But yeah, that's a great image. And so
would you assume that there is earthworms somewhere present there? So if we create the conditions, they will come back, or
and I've been on properties not far from you. Oh, look, Kathy's like, we've got the illegal worm dealership happening. So, and we've done workshops before where people have brought buckets of things, like buckets of dung beetles and buckets of worms, and done exchanges, and that's worthwhile. But yes, I have dug in soils not far from you, and there's certainly earthworms around. Obviously blackhead worm is an import, but I mean, you guys have some of the best worms in the world, quite frankly. So yes, these soils were, that's why I'm pointing out that mixing, like, I suspect that's mixing rather than mottling. Depends how deep down are we looking?
Well, I think this is about sort of 400 to 500 mils. So half a metre.
Yeah. But we're not seeing like iron mottles or manganese mottles, which are black, which would indicate that this, soil has got like just, really waterlogged and really degraded. And it smells, like you said, it smells good. So we can often see historical artifacts of what soils once looked like. Like I work on a lot of soils that have buried topsoil. And it's like there was once, topsoil here, it's blown over, and then people are blowing dust on top. Like you can really see the history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
So I
the
think it's
plants
when
that are growing, sorry, Nicole, the plants that are growing here, the root mass in the top 150 mils is really quite thick. And, Victoria, would you mind just if we can try and find one of those photographs, please?
Which one would you like, Peter?
Just keep going down a bit. So even the one with the
that bottom
nodulation in the middle
right.
with my
Ooh,
fingers,
yes.
there's a nodulate,
Mhm.
that one.
Yes.
So this is
Beautiful.
just some bermetic that's growing there, and this is in the top 150 mils. It actually looks really healthy. The soil's loose and hanging on the roots. It's just trying to get the root systems to be digging down deeper. I think that's what I
Mhm.
don't understand how to do. So is it a physical
Yeah.
or chemical constraint or biological?
It's a hormonal constraint. That's what that ethylene's doing, right?
Okay.
So that's why you have a couple of different options. Find a plant that can overcome it. Find a way of getting that rhizosheath development, rhizosheath protection, which could be the salicylic acid, can be some of our trace elements. So putting a trace element mix as a foliar. Don't know why I've gone blank. Zinc. I'm writing modules at the moment. And we were just looking at ethylene. But yeah, some of those, some of your country, we see real issues with zinc and I find
the zinc's
copper, cobalt, boron. So making your own trace element blends could be worthwhile just to kind of get over the hump. Because it does become this physical constraint, and you might be building away, and it might be happening. Maybe it's happening a couple of millimeters a year, but we humans live on a shorter time frame. You might want to move it quicker. So
and I mean, something like gypsum's not going to help to be able to just, if there's a chemical constraint there or too much magnesium or something, that's not going to help wash that down into the profile and help with the roots. Or is it, I mean, I'm trying to simplify things, I suppose, but I guess I'm just wondering.
Yeah. So we've had some really great results by putting gypsum under the seed. So direct drilling gypsum. Again, you want it with a carbon, but we have found that gets us over that hump, right? Because all that you're trying to do is think, how do I support plant health and get root development happening so this whole system can start working, and you can step back with the inputs. But I mean, without looking at any of your soil tests, but you're saying you have high magnesium.
Yeah, it is pretty high across a lot of this stuff.
So it becomes quite a valuable tool, and we're not looking at a lot. Like, you don't need to put a lot down in order to support that plant. So you're not trying to treat the entire place. You're just going to say, all right, underneath this seed, this plant's going to be able to build a massive root system. And we have done that in really heavy, like 60% magnesium soils in 6 weeks, broken right through that whole profile to depth. So it's probably a low hanging fruit in terms of investment.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I've sort of read
That's
some
great,
of
Peter.
Gary Zimmer's stuff, and he really loves calcium, I guess, and that's probably why I've thrown up gypsum. It's, the pH is pretty high on this stuff. It's it's up around 8, so it's not an issue with liming. It's probably to go, well, is gypsum going to help it? Anyway, look, I think I've certainly had my time. I really appreciate you giving us your time today, Nicole. Thanks for the advice.
Oh no, Peter, it's been a treat. Now I want you to consider that pH isn't anything to do with calcium. It's all about hydrogen. So we can see really high pH soils and high magnesium and still need calcium. So Gary Zimmer's excited about calcium for a very good reason. And especially in a lot of Australian soils, we see really big issues with calcium and calcium function. So yeah, take a look. It might be mag driving it. But thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Great. Just switching quickly. Thanks, Peter. Up. Go. Over to you, Alan.
Yeah, g'day. So we're mainly livestock producers, actually. We've got cattle and a pole merino stud, so running sheep. And we've got a bit of cropping, which is primarily forage cropping. We do grain from time to time, but it's generally more, well, these days, used to be a lot more, but these days it's mostly, we just do grain if we got extra ground available and moisture and prices are right. So most of it's mixed species forage that we fatten our lambs and our weaners on. So here's a forage crop. It's base of oats, but also got vetch. It's also asking me if I want to be Indonesian. Also got vetch and tillage radish, and we've got, for the first year we tried this year, some fenugreek and some linseed. So yeah, 5-way mix. Yeah, this paddock's
Beautiful.
yeah.
Tell me a little about the decision behind fenugreek and linseed.
Just looking for something to try different. We try different things each year. Last year we had some quinoa, didn't really grow here though. Fenugreek, heard Christine Jones, I think, was saying something about it being pretty good. The linseed, well, the guy we got the fenugreek off had some linseed and he recommended it, so we threw that in. It looks really good
Nice.
feed though,
Oh,
the
well.
linseed.
Yeah, and I think makes for pretty tasty beef and lamb.
We'll find that out in a
That's all
month or
about.
two.
Nice. So tell me, in the Coggins East, the Brix barometer is saying there was only 2.5 degrees difference between. So what was the indicator plant that you were testing?
I think it was milk thistle, I'm pretty sure, was in that paddock. Yes.
Yeah. So think of I think we found some other tests that had milk thistle from your place. So think of milk thistle as being the detox, like it is for the human body, the detox for the liver. So is there anything that you suspect that soil might be detoxing from?
Well, it's had long time chemical usage of all sorts of different things on it. So then there's probably lots of things it could be detoxing from.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I see a lot of it, I might want to do a soil test and just look for something residual or heavy metals. If you're seeing some of the other indicators for nitrates like cape weed or foxtail barley or nettles, or there's a bunch of nitrate weeds, then I'd suspect that maybe it's a nitrate that it's detoxing. But it's worth just looking at your plant community to ask that question, because when we're at 2.5 difference, then that milk thistle's winning the game of life. So we want to look at how do I support the crop I want to grow and make it less palatable for the milk thistle. You know, it's doing a great job. It's trying to be of service somehow. Like they're pretty amazing at actually bioaccumulating heavy metals and keeping it out of the food chain, which, you know, I think is good too, but it does like some good heavy chemicals.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's not much in the paddock. I had to scavenge for a fair distance to find enough to do a Brix test on. So there's not a lot of it there. Of all the paddocks I looked at, I'm probably the most happy with the Coggins East one. It's got a better color to it. So the Zephyr paddock one, the one that was shown up first, it's got a really brown tinge around the tips of the leaves, and it sort of hasn't really grown much in the last, well, since it cooled down the last 3 weeks. So yeah, that's probably one the Coggins East I'm pretty happy with compared to the others, at least. And we used it's Micro Start, it was called, on it last year, and we'll wonder if that's helped. It's a supposedly soil microbe stimulator. So yeah,
Has it
don't
got
know.
biology? Has it got biology in it, or it's a stimulant?
It does
like a
have
food?
some in it as well, yeah.
Okay.
But it's grew back really quickly as well. So that photos of that paddock, if you get some of them up, that's only been, I think it was 8 or 10 days after we'd grazed it, and it had already grown back a couple inches. Looking for ones from Coggins.
If we can just comment on when we're taking our samples to do our barometer, if I wasn't seeing any weeds, then I wouldn't do that measurement, because if there's no actual indicator plants, weed species on your transect, then that's a great outcome. So I'll be like, we're in the green because you actually don't have weed pressure. Because these are really clean rows, right? That's litter in between. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, that's right. I didn't do the litter tests in this paddock, but that's mostly litter all between. It's probably mostly barnyard grass, actually. So what's that an indicator of?
Low calcium and bacterial domination.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, where these you can make your own liquid lime applications pretty cheap. What else did you see in this field?
Probably I didn't spend a whole lot of time in this paddock. I had running out of daylight when I got here. So
Yeah.
I was just really happy with the color and the regrowth that we'd had.
Yeah. Yeah, if you zoom out a bit, Victoria, you'll see just that real evenness of color, especially if we've had livestock in these fields. Did they come in and graze? Yeah, sheep moved out of here 12 days ago. So to see evenness of color is one of our indicator of biological activity. Is once we see the biology really operating, we don't get that dark green, pale yellow distinction. You just start to see it all really evening up, and even the recovery looks very even. It's pretty cool.
Actually, yeah, this is the one I did the microbiometer reading on as well, which came back as pretty low. I don't know how accurate those things are. It was the first time I tried using it.
We've had mixed results, so I've actually stopped using it, unfortunately. It's a great teaching tool, but yeah.
What I was very
can you go
disappointed.
Back to the first? Yes.
What I'm very disappointed with is the infiltration we had everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, well let me look at these first two soils, the first two ones that you've got. Yes, there. This is part of the issue with infiltration. So how did this score on your slaking? Did you do a slaking test on this?
Yeah. I've got a 5-minute, a 60-minute, and 24-hour record of them. So this is the cattle yards paddock.
Yeah.
And that was a bit lower. I've actually still got them set up over there.
Do you want to tell everyone how you do this? Because I think this little test here tells you so much. It's incredible, actually.
I'm actually just going to go walk over to where they are still set up.
We like that. Mobile.
But yeah, so the cattle yard one, it's sort of, to do it, I just grabbed it was like a 0.5 centimeter to 1 centimeter thick clod of dirt. I dried it out in front of the fire for a few days, and then I've just set up a bowl. I don't know if you can see. I've just set up some bowls on a bench,
Oh,
and
is
I've got a bit of
fabulous.
water in each of them, and I just lightly dropped in the clod of earth, and then I've just been monitoring it over as I said, 5 minutes, 24 hour, an hour later than the next day. And that one was terrible. Where's that one? Yeah.
So which one's terrible?
The eastern one. It's completely dispersed.
Did that line up with your slower infiltration?
I didn't do an infiltration in that paddock, so I don't know.
Okay. All right.
But all of my infiltrations were very slow, which I was very disappointed about.
Yeah.
And especially in the cattle yard paddock, which is the one on the screen there now, because it's been in pasture for the last 4 years, we put lucerne in there during the drought, and it sort of just got abandoned. Then we only put it back into crop again this year.
Yeah.
And the soil looks and feels and smells really nice, but the water just wasn't going in. I mean, I don't know how much that was. We had an inch of rain, but that was 10 days earlier. It had been really moist all week, but it might have been, it was barely measurable rain. It was just mist all around, but it just didn't infiltrate at all.
No, and you can see why. So this really, so if you think about all of the activity of microbiology and the root systems and what they're forming, I always like to think of it as poos and wheeze and spit and vomit. All these things that microbes are exuding and the plants are sending out start to form glues and like sticky proteins, which is all your nitrogen around those aggregates. And if we don't have them, if we don't have all of those byproducts, then soils will do this with when they're soaked in water, basically. So it's telling you that we don't really have a lot of biological activity at all. And if you were to measure it, what kind of biology do you have? This will be very, very bacterially dominated, which actually your microbiome meter said, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So we're looking for that aggregate stability. So how clean this water stays, how these aggregates stick together, even after 24 hours, is really telling you how resilient is my soil, how much air and gas movement. It tells you about your nitrogen cycle. I mean, there's so much that just doing this one test tells you. We did this across the property on 6 different pastures, and what we found was how well they stuck together absolutely related to the soil microbial testing that we were doing. So we're kind of like, I don't know if we need the microbe test, we've got that. Save yourself some money.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Do you want to look at there's one that did really well. Yeah.
Which the second, do you want to look at the second picture or?
Second one. So those are, look at the 5-minute ones, because if your soil's going to really disperse, they can do that within that first moment. Yeah.
Can you grab one of those?
Yeah, beautiful. And see, look at the little air bubbles. So indicator that, biology are there, they're respiring, they're making little bubbles. We can see a lot of bubbles coming off some of these soils. See that aggregate sticking together. And if you go to the next image on the right, Victoria, you see even this one after 5 minutes you can see that discoloration. So, when we think about soil losses, people often think about, being blown by the wind, but actually a lot of the soil losses are invisible and are just happening as water's moving through. But I'd really be looking and tracking that infiltration, Alan. I think an inch of water in the last 2 weeks wouldn't be affecting this at all.
I wouldn't have thought so.
We've taken soils that will infiltrate less than an inch in an hour to over 16 inches in an hour. So what is that going to take for your own property? So if we can have a look, Victoria, at a profile would be quite good.
Probably one of those.
Yeah, that would be interesting. So was there a lot of the very fine aggregates, or did you
Not
see
too
a
bad,
lot
how
of
are you at?
clods? Sort of thicker crumb.
Sorry, just
Is
asked
this pretty
again.
typical?
That was pretty typical. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it was like the soil was quite moist at the time,
Mhm.
and it's came out a big clod and then broke it down, and that's fairly well how everything broke down into that. Was pretty consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can see that being really a limitation. And then if we go across Victoria, I think we've got a better like profile, just the
Yeah, no worries.
digging
You
a
got me a
hole.
message
Yeah.
last night, passed along
You
to
got a
Alan.
Coggins East
He's just
maybe
in
with a ruler?
a seminar webinar thingy at the moment. But I can get him to give you a call back as soon as he's.
He will call you back when the webinar's done. Marvelous. So what depth, what are we looking at here? That's what you're saying 80% of the roots are at? 2 inches.
Yeah, it's kind of, I found it a little bit hard to tell exactly. But yes, that's where the root clods broke off, and I figured, well, that's where it's breaking off. That's probably where the roots are stopping.
I think that's probably a really good way to do this. But if you notice, there's not a lot of root mass at all, considering. Is that oats growing in there?
Yeah, so this is all the paddocks have got the same, but it's primarily oats is the majority of the root mass. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, as we pointed to with Peter, there's potentially issues. Anytime the soil's not breathing, when your infiltration's that slow, I can promise you ethylene is building up. So if you go to the right, Victoria, I think there's a better one of the profile. Beautiful. Okay. Yeah, slightly. So notice, oh, no, stay on that one. Notice how what we were seeing is the roots were actually growing flat. They're growing through cracks, right? See, they're actually pushed up against the side of that block. Now that top, you can see, and this is for everyone to notice, is as that soil building process is happening, you're going to get more and more of that finer aggregate formation. So this is happening really on that top 1.5 centimeters, is that we're starting to get aggregation forming. We're starting to see some rhizosheaths. If you've got your little cursor there, Victoria, can you just slide it to the top left? Just go down. Yeah, there. See, that's the beginning of rhizosheath development, is where the actual root will be covered in soil, so you can't actually see it. So we're getting that very first building block. It does look like there are teeny tiny little root hairs on that. So that's excellent. And what you want to look at is, where do those root hairs, where do we see them start to fall off? Is it at, 6 centimeters, 10 centimeters? And for some people that are using machinery, what we generally aim for is, if we were going to rip, and we're going to drip biologicals, when we do that, we're going to aim to do that about 1 inch below where that current layer is. Either where it's tight, or you've got a pan, or where we stop seeing root hair formation would be worthwhile. But it's interesting. Was there something else you wanted to show us, Alan?
Yeah, well, links to what you've just said, jump to any of the photos of the rhizosheaths, or just the plants sitting out, and that was the same with the legumes. Like within that top 1 to 2 inches, good rhizosheaths, good nodulation, and below that one's actually better all the way along. But a lot of the other ones that I pulled out, it was sort of really good for that first couple inches, and then the roots were pretty clean below that.
Yeah. Oh, great observation. The other thing that can be happening
that's a good example.
Yes, is aluminium. Aluminium can stop our root hair formation, but generally what you see is, if you've got high aluminium, they'll grow sideways. So you'll see roots that are clean, but they go sideways. So I suspect, again, we've got something else kind of going on. But you can test for that. I don't know what your pH is. I don't think that was Alan's problem. With a pH at 8, it's not going to be aluminium. Do you know what your pH is?
Yeah, around that 8, I think it was.
Okay. All right. So
back at
we
the
can
start of the year.
we can,
Yeah.
so we can say potentially is not the problem, right? But yes, I think thinking of plants that have these big fibrous roots and some, you know, linseed. What was the other one you had? Linseed, fenugreek. You know,
Fenugreek.
they have some pretty, yeah, amazing root systems. So go and look at some of your forbs and take a look. And what you want to see is really straight down development of that root. And if not, then suspect either we're not getting mycorrhizal colonization that will actually affect how that root grows, or it could be that it's hitting a layer. And so what you could do is do a soil test. You know, you might have your normal soil test at 20 centimeters. Go below that, go 20 to 40 and send off a soil test and just take a look. Is there something unusual happening? Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you. Thanks for sharing.
With that browning of the ones in Zephyr paddock, of the plants in Zephyr paddock, does it need a foliar spray now? What would you recommend for that?
Was it rust?
I don't really know. Just
I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm, so hopefully you guys don't lose me. If I do, I'll go on my phone. But like I said, season here is wacky.
yeah, is there any
So
got any
sorry
of the
to see-
photos of Zephyr paddock there?
Excuse me, what did you say, Alan?
Photos of Zephyr paddock of the actual plants. Can't really see it very clearly in that photo.
Oh,
You
there
can
it
see
is.
that one plant near the front though. Probably that one beside where the ute is. That might show it.
This one might be better.
Yeah, it's just loses it. It's not a great color, and you can kind of see in there the tips are all almost dying actually, going brown, reddish brown.
Are they twist? Do they twist? Some of them are twisting.
Looks like a little bit.
Yeah, so it's hard to diagnose without being in the field, but so if you're seeing things like browning and bronzing off and twisting, that's generally a copper deficiency, rather than a biological issue. If you're seeing spotting, if you're seeing that you know, rust will show up on every leaf. But yeah, older leaves. It's like older leaves. Yeah, sorry, couldn't diagnose it from here, but you know, typically if we're seeing nutrient deficiencies on the leaves, you kind of already missed the boat in some ways. But you know, I think a lot of properties I work with, it doesn't hurt to make your own chelated trace elements. You can do that pretty cost effectively, and just give these things a foliar boost in the growing season. So, you know, if you're, where are we? Midwinter, right?
Yeah, that's right.
These
So
photos
that's
were
been
taken.
in the ground for 3 months.
Yeah.
That was only last week.
Yeah. So
Sorry. Conscious of time.
yeah, couldn't say. Sorry, Ellen.
We
Yeah,
might-
okay.
We might jump to questions if that's okay before we wrap up.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Alan, Peter, and Jessica. I think that was a great example of how, you know, quite simple in-field soil assessments can tell us so much about what's going on. The earlier questions we had, Nicole, is from Russell. He has a mixed species pasture running towards a barley grass dominated base, wishes he had more sheep. Do you have any suggestions to slow the barley grass and allow the covers to dominate the spring?
Russell, are we talking foxtail barley?
Feel
Is that
free.
what you mean by barley grass? We always have different languages around the world for.
I don't know if
Yeah,
it
the barley grass is, I'm not sure either, but It is a weed, I guess you'd call it here in Australia.
Hordeum leporinium or something like that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Whoa.
Courtney.
Foxtail like
Where do we see a plant like that normally growing?
Russell, do you want to
Is there
respond?
Yeah, it tends to, I guess, build up in a long-term pasture that's not grazed well, and it seeds. It's an annual species. It seeds in the spring, summer, and yeah, it tends to just, I guess, build up over time. And I'm just trying to control it with grazing, but I'm aware that it'll seed in the spring and get more next year. That's all.
Yeah. So I think just always asking that question about what are the conditions, it sounds like you've identified like a lack of grazing is a driver. But this is where digging our holes and really building that observation so we can start to learn what is it that this particular plant's trying to tell me, and then how do I do it out of a job. As a general overarching rule, most grasses are low functional calcium and low functional fungi, right? And we can stimulate fungi through good grazing management. Many of our legumes will stimulate fungi. So just, what you can see is it starts to tend more to a grass dominant. We lose all the legumes. You'll lose aggregate structure. And actually, it can be an early warning system that system is starting to kind of go into decline. So this is where either calcium or things like bale grazing, encouraging animals to really get in there and hitting it pretty hard can be helpful. But I would do some trials, so we can do some pretty simple trials with humics. I mean, it sounds like it's not Eli, is it?
Ellie.
It's Ellie.
Hell.
Yeah, I always think you like Al. What Ellie was talking about is building this resource of some of the things that you can trial. So we've had some good success with things like white wood chips, and some of these sort of low quality grass species. But yeah, your fish hydrolysates, all sorts of things. But yeah, I think the high density, someone just said it, high density grazing is your number one tool for this.
I'll certainly do some trials. Thanks, Nicole.
Stephen and Ben were interested in the ethylene topic. How can we add salicylic acid? I think you mentioned in foliars maybe, or
foliars, seed treatments. Yeah, it's pretty economical. Again, and then this is the interesting thing of like traditional knowledge or ancestral knowledge is for how long have people known to do willow bark or willow extract, so soaking chopped up willow in barrels. That's your salicylic acid right there. So you can spray on the salicylic acid. Tony asked about vineyards. I mean, that could be something in a vineyard. You could try it, spraying it on. Often we're thinking about it in terms of putting it down as a seed treatment.
And Ben, I think you've already covered this, but ethylene is related to compaction and anaerobic conditions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a natural byproduct of biological bacterial activity. And what happens is if you've got a crust or a plow pan or porous structure, it just can't off gas. So it's always in soil. And it is very beneficial in lots of ways, but when we get it building up in soils, that's where we start to see issues with root hair formation.
Aaron would love a recommendation for some cost-effective biological seed treatments. And Ellie did put in a comment to say that we are releasing a practice guide on this, so stay tuned. But it would be good to hear your thoughts, Nicole, on what's a good starting point.
Honestly, you can't go past the good worm butt juice for me. Leaf field house here, I see. Go the worms. But you know, I think worms, Johnson Su compost, high fungal compost, all of this stuff you can make yourself really, really economically. I think compost extracts, some of the natural Korean farming systems, there's so much on the internet now that, you know, you can get these how-to videos, but those are always my go-to when I get started. Yeah. You know, and there's a lot of beneficial hormones in that too, right? Thank
you, Aaron, for the question. Mark would like your secret liquid calcium recipe.
Not so secret. It's just the old lime wash recipe, whitewash. I think it's in my book, For the Love of Soil, if you haven't got it. But it's just as simple as the whitewash recipe. The only problem is you need specific equipment where things aren't going to fall out. So I have a cyclone sprayer that actually keeps things agitated that I love. But if you can emulsify it, so you can buy, I'm going to tell you a secret actually. Some of the best quality liquid limes are just what they make paint with. So if you've got just old simple acrylic paint that hasn't got any additives in it, they're the way they make it, it's just hydrated or slaked or burnt lime that they've added water to. So that can actually be quite cheap, but otherwise, yeah. And then it's emulsified, so we'll actually get it to stay in solution.
Hot tip. Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for the question. Clarence, you kind of answered that question about oh no, maybe you didn't. Roots going sideways. Our paddocks were waterlogged in northeast New South Wales for months. Now we have big fireweed plants, which I've noticed have sideways growing roots. I thought maybe from compaction and lack of oxygen, but maybe also aluminium. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, northeast New South Wales. Yeah, possibly. And again, this is where digging holes and doing a deeper soil test might be very helpful. But we will see that as waterlogging, as a symptom of waterlogging. And what I see, especially after all that flooding that many of your areas had, is just that breakdown in soil structure, seeing that real hardening right through the profile and root systems going sideways. So we used to have a waterlogging recovery program because we had fields that would go underwater for like 3 weeks at a time, and sometimes it would happen a couple times a year. And so we would use that whitewash recipe with a little bit of EM, effective microorganisms, and whitewash, EM, a little bit of fish hydrolysate. And everything I do, I put worm juice in it because who knows better than the worm? But what I found is if we didn't do that, is like the minute that we could actually get on the fields and it's dried up enough to be able to get out there, if you don't do that, you're going to end up with a lot of these pretty hardcore weeds because they're trying to do the job. So again, it's the question of asking that plant, what are you trying to do? And can I do you out of a job? Thank you very much. Right.
Amazing. And Rob made a comment earlier about milk thistle maybe being connected to low zinc availability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, this is do your leaf testing on your particular encroaching weed. So if you find, and we have seen this in some cases, but not all cases, very high zinc in milk thistle, but not everywhere. So you need to figure out for your particular place, are they bioaccumulating? And what that means is in soils that are low in zinc, these particular plants are able to take zinc out of the soil and then put it into plant available forms, and they will exude that out their roots. So we see them correcting issues like a zinc deficiency over time, which is amazing if you want to wait like 100 years.
Thank you, Rob, for the comment. And Terry, have you had any thoughts or experience with applying wood vinegar to the soil or to plant?
Yeah, so I imagine more and more people are talking about wood vinegar in Australia because it's one of the byproducts from biochar production. I haven't used it. I've heard different anecdotal results. I think, again, this is one of the ones you want to trial for yourself. So I know some people have had some really, really great results and some that have not. So try it for yourself.
Thank you. Angela's question is around worm juice. Is it site specific? As in, will the worm juice have similar deficiencies to the soils that the worms are in? So should it be cross-pollinated? As in, do worms in healthier soils have healthier juice?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yes. And there's probably more to it, but I certainly think if I'm building a worm farm, I'm gonna feed them things that I think is going to be more specific to what my land needs. So I might put on some guano for phosphorus. I might use some calcium because I know my land is low in calcium, because what that does is it then promotes your phosphate solubilizing bacteria and their metabolites, or and so then you're building something that's specific for your land, and you don't need to be putting out huge volumes because those organisms can breed up super quickly.
Thank you, Angela. From Aaron, do you have any resources to learn more about how weeds are indicators?
I haven't really found a great one for Australia. You guys have some very interesting weeds. That this is where I think doing leaf testing on your plant and test the leaf of the encroaching plant and a leaf of the plant that you do want to grow. So let's say you've got oats and you're going to compare that to cape weed, and learn to read the weed. Yeah, I think that's worthwhile. There's a book called When Weeds Talk. I could show you it, but I've lost the cover because I've had this for a long time. But this one gives you a breakdown. It's by J McCaman, and it breaks down like as a plant trying to indicate whichever. This guy, yes, Ali, that would be great. You guys need a resource. But this one, it doesn't include nitrates. And I think what's interesting in the Australian context is we see a lot of nitrate indicating weeds. There's been a question about cape weed. Cape weed, hands down, is your nitrate indicator. So if you have bare ground, if you have bacterially dominated soils, it doesn't matter what your soil type is, in comes the cape weed. So I think get curious about what your landscape is trying to tell you. They are communicating.
I'll come back to your question, Alan, in a second, but Tony's question is a good one. You said you struggled with the 10 indicators, but what would your top 2 soil evaluations be?
How I feel when I walk out in the field, number 1. So, you know, do you get that sense of vibrancy and just that soil is alive and humming? You'll feel it from the people that you're working with. That would always be my number 1. Yeah, I don't know, maybe that there's a smell. Smells are pretty good. Yeah, I think probably that slaking test, if we had to look at, yeah. Oh, it's so hard. See, you're so mean to me. No. I think that feel is just number 1 and number 2.
Oh, that's beautiful. Alan's question, which may be our last one as we need to wrap up, but how do you build the right conditions for worms to come?
Oh, beautiful. How do you build the conditions? Well, I think a lot of this is, 1, why haven't you got worms? Stop doing that. So it's killing them. And then really just what they're feeding on is microbiology. So the more microbiology you're going to get in that soil system, then the more food for earthworms. And what you'll see is they can start coming in from the sides, and worms can travel like 400 meters in the night across that soil surface if they feel like, hey, your place is humming. It's amazing how they can sense and feel the vibrations in a soil, and they will come to that food. So really focusing on how do I capture as much sunlight energy, making sure soils aren't bare, and not spraying things. Certainly things like some of our drenches and wormers. So just thinking about what you're doing with some of the inputs is what could be killing worms. But building organic matter, mulch, litter, bale grazing, whatever that is, trampling organic material. Yeah. I just, anytime anyone goes past my place and they're like dumping wood chips or they've got some kind of waste material or rotten hay bales, I'm always like, just bring it. Whatever it looks like, just bring it. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And living roots in the soil. Hurrah. Thanks, everybody. So cool to see your soils. Thank you.
Thank
I know it's
you.
ruffling through the underpant drawer, but it's brilliant.
Thank you very much to the farmers, and thank you, Nicole and Victoria from Vidacycle. I think that's been a really jam-packed session, and I hope you're all feeling inspired to get out and do some of these really simple soil tests on your farm. And if you are an Australian grain grower, then please reach out and you can we can see if you're eligible for a free trial of the Soilmentor app. And please stay in touch about other events and resources that Soils for Life are doing. Maybe we'll have to help work on that weed topic.
Yeah, do it.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Nicole.
Nicole. Thanks, Courtney.
Have a good one.